Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody. It just wanted to so it's nice that we have today's class in the middle of the summer, and we're going to have a class also next week. I don't know if it's bad or not bad, but the third class that we're supposed to be is not going to take place because again, I have to go to Israel ahead of schedule. It's actually for good reasons. I guess for us, it's good reasons. We're having my daughter's bat mitzvah, Israeli bat mitzvah, whatever. And what we decided to do is we're going to do it with a group of Chayalim, sponsor dinner for them, and that was scheduled. And then yesterday we got a call that we have to make it a week earlier because they're not going to be available. And the Chayalim are not going to be available on when we schedule that. So I'm going to leave 3 days earlier than I expected. And so our third class is not going to take place. But next week, I'm going to see everybody as planned. So we're meeting today and next week. August 5, I want to say 5. August 5th, I think. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And then for how long will you not do class?
I think, yeah, because my flights are going to be on Tuesdays, so I think like maybe 3. We're going to miss 3 and then we'll go back. We'll figure this out. We'll send an email. Okay. So where are we? We started a long time ago, this journey with Shabbat, actually. We started with Shabbat. We went through Kabbalat Shabbat, Shacharit, Musaf, Mincha. And then we went to weekdays, Tefillah, Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. And I think, and when we discussed Shabbat, we already discussed Shalosh Regalim as well. So we actually discussed a lot of stuff. And so what I would like to do today and next week is kind of like, again, to go into the main points, kind of overview of the whole thing. Why? Ask me why. Because when I'm back, and that's going to be exactly, and when I'm back, and it's going to be very apropos, we're going to start tackling the high holiday liturgy. So in order to understand the high holiday liturgy, we really have to have a clear understanding of the key points of the weekday and Shabbat tefillah. And I would say even more importantly is the structure of the tefillah. Okay? Because what happens when we go to the holidays, you start looking at the Rosh Hashanah, I don't know, Amidah, and I say, what is this? Yeah, it doesn't follow any of the. So you need to really understand the structure of the tefillah in order to, so the whole thing of the Chagim is going to make sense. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of stuff, and you don't know what's the core, what are the additions, how do I navigate in this thing? It's really, it's like the advanced. So I think that it's important for us this 2 weeks to really, really make sure that we understand that. Okay, so everything that we took, that we learned in the last, I don't know, year, I guess, or 2. I don't even remember. No, last year we still did. I lost year. Okay, I lost count. So we need to really understand. Okay, so
January 14.
January 14, 2025. No,
I'm wrong. Okay.
no. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, let's start.
Right.
Let's start. So tefillah and the whole thing, that's not from the Torah, right? Torah doesn't talk about Siddur, doesn't talk about tefillah, doesn't talk about any of that stuff. What does the Torah talk about? את הכבש אחד תעשה בבוקר ואת הכבש השני תעשה בין הערביים. You have daily korbanot, you have daily sacrifices. That's what the Torah says. Did people daven? No, I didn't say that. Did people daven in the times of the Bible or the Torah when they felt like it? Okay, good. So now we're going, if you remember, if you can think that far, we discussed actually in depth that basic machloket that talks about what is the origin of tefillah? The patriarchs or the korbanot? And the Talmud goes out of this way to give text proof that Abraham was the one to institute the morning tefillah, Isaac is the mincha, and Jacob is the Mariv tefillah. Okay, wonderful. But then the bottom line conclusion of the Talmud is what? It's both. So our tefillot are modeled based on both principles. So what does it mean? How does it? Okay. So in the times from the patriarchs all the way to the times of the korbanot, people, when they felt like acknowledging, talking to God, whatever, that kind of stuff, it was on a personal level. There was no formula. There was no set time. There was none of that stuff. They turned to God. I remember when growing up, unfortunately, we don't see that anymore. But growing up, so I grew up in Israel in a little place, and everybody in our shul was a Holocaust survivor. Everybody. My grandparents, like, everybody was like around us. And I remember those older ladies, they were talking to God the whole time in their own language, mainly in Yiddish, by the way. But like, complaining about us, the kids, making too much noise, complaining about their husbands, complaining about politics, whatever that is. But it was so authentic. They didn't need a time, or they didn't need to come to a shul or to open a siddur in order to speak to God. It was very natural. Just the way they spoke to other people, they spoke to God the whole time. The whole time. Yeah. Just a sec. Yeah, maybe, yes.
I grew up in that kind of a world. Also, everybody listens to all the Holocaust survivors. What I really wanted to say is, while you were gone, one of the hostages spoke here, and he talked about talking to God.
Correct.
And it was very clear he did not come from a
Right.
an
But-
observant family, and yet he felt very, and he saw God answering him, and I felt like it was such a message for him.
That's incredible. These are obviously extreme conditions, like really extreme conditions. I'm talking about even like complaining that the air conditioning is not working. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's that. And so I think that people talk to God. I think that the presence of God was very much felt. Okay.
So did they them too before?
Shema was not written yet.
No, I mean,
I'm talking about until. No, I'm not there yet. I'm talking about the time before the korbanot yet.
oh,
I'm talking about Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I'm talking about Yosef. I'm talking about the 12 tribes. Wait, wow. As we say in Yiddish, joye, yeah? And that's in Arabic. Anyway, so yeah. So well, the point is there was no formula, there was no set time. People, okay. Then comes the Torah, right? Then comes the Torah, and the Torah doesn't talk about tefillot at all. The Torah talks about korbanot. Okay, and we have two obligatory korbanot that were brought first in the desert, in the Mishkan, later on in Beit HaMikdash. One in the morning, one in the afternoon. Okay, so later on, the rabbis in the Talmud learn from that that is the source. Okay, we'll get there in a second. What was happening in Beit HaMikdash also is the burning of the fats and the leftovers overnight. Okay, so the leftovers, a lot of people bringing korbanot. It's not only the obligatory, the communal korbanot that are brought, but also korbanot nedava, shlamim, all sorts of korbanot, other korbanot that people bring, okay? And it takes time. It takes time. So some of the limbs, some of the fats, some of those parts are being burned throughout the night. And then we know the Torah described that the first thing that the Kohen did in the morning is what? Clean up. Clean up. Take out the ashes, clean up, start a new fire, and everything start again. Okay? Fine. So back to the Talmud. The Talmud talks about, okay, so we have those 3 times, the morning sacrifice, afternoon sacrifice, and what we have is during the night is the burning of the leftovers and the fats and all that kind of stuff. And that is parallel to the concept or form of Tefillah that was instituted by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, i.e. morning, afternoon, and evening. Okay. Fast forward from the times of the Torah into the times of Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the members of the Great Assembly. They're formulating prayer. Right? So what are we talking about? Temple is destroyed. Temple is destroyed. Can you continue bringing korbanot in your kitchen? No, you can't do that. Right? One of the big no-nos in the Tanakh, and especially you can see that in the book of Shoftim and the book of Melachim, one of the biggest sins that people did is they have bamot. It's not necessarily that they worship idols or any of that stuff or other gods, but the problem was that they decided they can bring korbanot in other places. Okay, they built a stage, and that's it. If you remember in the time of when the kingdom split, right after Solomon, and you have Yerovam in Yehuda, and you have Rechavam in Yehuda, and Yerovam in Israel. One of the things that Yerovam did is what? He built Bamot, and because he said, you don't have to go to Yerushalayim to bring your korbanot. We're going to have altars here. Right? That was a big problem. One of the reasons that the Torah is so obsessed with this idea is because you want everybody to come to the same place. Because if I'm a tribe that I'm somewhere there in the north, and this one is in this, then there's no unity. The Torah wants to make sure that we become one nation, right? And how that's going to happen? Well, if we have to go to Pesach, to Yerushalayim, for example, all of us, okay, great. And then guess what? We're going to have dinner together in a restaurant or whatever, or my kids are going to meet your kids and we're going to have a wedding and we become family. Okay? So if we all have a central location where everything is happening, it's not only because God needs it, it's because we need it. Okay? Fine. So fast forward. The temple is destroyed. Bamot, other stages are a big no-no. So the question becomes, what do we do? What do we do? We can't bring korbanot anymore. What do we do? right? And so the practice emerged of what? No, the Mishkan preceded the temple, right? So what is it that we're doing? Prayer came. So that means, what is the avodah? Avodah is a service. In the classic interpretation, that means the service, that means the korbanot. So avodah shebalev. So we transferred, yes?
Were there any other people that were doing sort of prayer form?
Yeah. So as I said, from the times of Abraham, people were praying, but it was not formalized. It was correct. Now, with time, by the way, with time, and we have, for example, very clear, certain passages were said as part of the rituals. Like we know that the Kohanim used to give the Birkat Kohanim during the time of the temple. There are certain psalms that were instituted accompanying the sacrificial work. There were, the Levim used to, Seymour knows about it. He, as a high-ranking Levi, Levim used to sing during the rituals, when the rituals took place in Beit HaMikdash, etc. So there was an element of text already there. After the destruction of the first, and here is what happens. First temple is destroyed. People go into exile in Babel. Conditions are very tough. Very, very tough. They were sold to slavery, poverty. There was terrible, terrible, terrible situation. And what happens? People need to find some,
Like get together.
to get together. They need some, they're depressed. They're like, right? So, and that's the beginning of the shuls, the JCCs, the whatever. Probably started in backyard minyanim. Right? People got together to give comfort to each other, right? They're refugees in a foreign land, to give comfort to each other. What do? You have tea, okay? But you also try to lift up your spirit somehow, and not to mention, you read from the Torah, you try to study, you try to maintain your identity, right? You start to do, you go to do something with Jewish to make sure that you remain Jewish, and that progresses, and probably certain prayers started to emerge. Prayers that talk about healing, prayer that talk about return to Zion, to Jerusalem. I don't know, all that kind of stuff, right? Fine. Then come Ezra and Nehemiah, right? People make Aliyah or return to Israel, and eventually the second temple is built. At that time, what we have? We have again korbanot, okay? Because the Torah is very clear, you bring those korbanot. However, the shuls continue. And hundreds of synagogues all over Israel, even in Yerushalayim, they found synagogues that were active during the times of the second temple. So people, yes, the rituals took place in the temple. So you check the box because you pay the dues, and by doing that, the Kohanim did the whole thing in the temple, so you're good, right? But people still wanted the self-expression. They wanted to do something, right? So they gathered together, and prayers started to emerge. And what are the first prayers? Verses from the Bible. Okay, but when you come together, we learn a little bit, we do this, we do, all that kind of stuff. It started to take form. We're talking about hundreds of years, okay? This is not like, one day, okay? There's hundreds of years. Okay, fast forward, the second temple is destroyed. We go again to exile, but during that time, also we understand that what? We already have something. So while one aspect of the rituals, one aspect of how we express our connection to God, let's call it, the other aspect of what we call service of the heart continues. And because there's no other part, i.e. the sacrifices, this becomes the main form of connecting with God. And of course, all the rabbinic liturgy starts, and we start to emphasize other elements. As Torah study becomes, something very important, and the rituals and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. But the prayers are written and formalized, because what happens? Rabbis realize, well, if it moves from a central location where the Kohanim are doing everything on behalf of everybody, so what happens? What is the shift? The shift moves from the Kohanim, or from a central location, to what? To the individual. Now it's not the obligation on behalf of the nation. Everybody is doing it for themselves. Oh, wow. So now, if I have to do it for myself, I don't really know how to do it. Many of those don't even know how to read. How can I adequately express myself to God? And the rabbis said, okay, we'll write it down. Okay, so Ansei Knesset HaGdolah, write most of our tefillot. This is how we end up with this, pretty much. And with time, obviously, more and more, and additions and rules around it, and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So that's the intro. This is how we end up with this thing. Now, let's break it down. What do we actually have? So if we have the three avot, the three patriarchs, and we have the korbanot, so that means we're going to have three tefillot a day. Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. Good. So that's what we have every day. Okay, fine. What do we have on special days? Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh. And that's from the Torah. That's not, I'm saying the rabbis at that time, not inventing anything. They're saying, if the number of services or the number of tefillot parallels their korbanot, the sacrifices on a day. So what happens on days in which we have additional korban, musaf, right? We have additional tefillah called musaf, okay? And that's going to be Shabbat, there's going to be holidays, there's going to be Rosh Chodesh, etc. This is where it comes from. And that's basically the basic structure that we have. Good, fine. Now, what are those elements that we have in the tefillah? So, the rabbis in the Talmud already tell us that the nucleus, okay, the most fundamental, the nucleus of every tefillah is what? What we call she'ilat tzarachim. You ask God for what you need. In our terminology, what is it? It's the Amidah. It's the Amidah. And therefore, the central prayer in each service is the Amidah. That's the heart of the Amidah. Everything that we do is kind of like leading us to the Amidah. We're going to see it in a second. I'm going to be more specific. So every service, we're going to have an Amidah. Fine. Because this is my time with God. I actually talk to God. I tell God, hey, I need this. Please give me this. That's the purpose of that. Okay. Now, at the same time, we have another mitzvah. Another mitzvah that the Torah talks about, which is Shema. Right? The Torah says when you lie down and when you wake up. Okay, so the rabbis interpret exactly what it means in terms of the day and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and there's like a whole discussion going back to the Mishnah already in Masechet Berachot and later on in the Talmud, and they formalize it. Okay, so we have the Shema. Shema are verses from the Bible. Fine. So I need to read the Shema morning and evening. Okay, later on it's being expanded. We have more, the beginning of the service, we have before we go to bed, technical, historical reasons, all that kind of stuff. We spoke about that. And then what happens? Well, if it's formalized, we're already going to get people, make them come to shul, so let's maximize that. So we have the Shema, and we have the Amidah, and we need to create the stuff in between. Okay? The stuff in between was created. So for example, the Shema, again, that was the old practice. We spoke about it many times. The ancient practice was when you have a passage from the Bible, you make it into a sandwich, right? You have blessings, i.e. rabbinic text before and after. We see that in the Shema, for example. We have the blessings before and the blessings after. We have that, for example, in Hallel. Hallel is past, the basically chapters of Psalms, right? So we have a blessing before and we have a blessing after. We have that was the ancient practice. So that means it's like when you write an essay, right? You don't go to your big bold idea immediately. You build it up, then you present and whatever, and then you have the conclusion. It's the same idea. Some sort of a structure. Okay. So let's talk about Shacharit very quickly. Structure, Mincha, and Arvit. Very quickly. So we said already that we know that we have two elements. We have the Shema, which is biblical, and we have the Amidah, which is kind of the heart. Fine. So all the stuff, the other stuff is the stuff in between. What's the functionality of the stuff in between? Preparation, connectors, and ending. That's basically it. Okay? So now, if you look through this Siddur, you'll see, I have Birkot HaShachar. Okay, Birkot HaShachar, the morning blessings, the Rabbi institute that. Why? Because they want to set up my psychic, my mindset for the day. You should have this attitude of gratitude. We talk about it from the Modéani, from the very beginning. Okay. Then we have Psukei de Zimra. We have Psukei de Zimra. What's the idea of Psukei de Zimra? Preparation. If you're going to go into if you exercise, right? I don't start singing on Shabbat morning, boom, right? I come an hour before or 45 minutes before into my office and I vocalize, right? You have to have a warm-up before. So that's Psukei de Zimra. Then we have the Shema. Then we have the Amidah. And then we have all sorts of historic expansions of that. Fine. And then basically we finish. That's it. That's the whole thing. I know it doesn't sound so short, but in terms of overall structure, and we kind of went into the details of every unit and how it functions and why, whatever. That was last year material. It's all on the YouTube channel. Okay. Then we have Mincha. So Mincha is smack in the middle of the day. I know that today what we do is we try to do it as close as possible tomorrow, but that's for practical reasons. Because it's hard to get people to shul anyway, so get them 3 times instead of 2 times, it's even harder. But in the old days, a lot of people still do it today, by the way, they daven Mincha earlier in the day. It's called Mincha Gdolah. So they do it during lunch break or whatever, that kind of stuff. Even in Century City, there are some buildings that they have a minyan down, I lived in Midtown Manhattan for 2 years. The number of minyanim that we have during lunch hour or around that time in Midtown Manhattan, it's crazy. Anyway, yeah, but I'm saying especially if you go to the area. I lived in 43rd Street. If you go to 47th Street, the Diamond District, it's there's at least 30, 40 minyanim there. It's crazy. Anyway, point is it's smack in the middle of the day, right? You go back to work, you don't have a lot of time. So basically what we do, we go right into the heart of it, which is the Amidah. You can't really start with the Amidah. You're going to talk to God, tell God, hey, I need this and this and this and this without any preparation. Doesn't work like that. So the minimum of the minimum, one psalm. Which psalm? Ashrei. Why? Because it has the entire alphabet. So you say, again, listen, God, from A to Z, let's get to the point. Okay? And then done. Aleinu, which is the concluding prayer, which we spoke about, what is the purpose of Aleinu? Is to basically give me spiritual protection as I go back into the big bad world out there, when I'm no longer sheltered by the spiritual, okay? That's it. That's the whole mincha. Okay. Which leads us to the Mariv. The Mariv, again, so we go immediately into the Shema. Yes, I understand. The Shema itself, we said it's a sandwich. So we have the blessings before, we have the blessings after. Okay, after that Shema section, where do we go? Amidah. And then we're done. Concluding, finished, done. That's all. What's the difference between, one of the fundamental differences between the Mariv, Amidah, and the Mincha or Shachrit? There's no repetition. There's no repetition. Okay, let's talk about it for a second. So, the Amidah, I speak to God, I ask for all the things that I need, that I want, whatever. That's my private time with God. Great. But what if I don't know how to read? What if I don't know how to express myself? So the rabbi said, you know what? We're going to have a leader, the Chazan, and the Chazan is going to recite all that stuff afterward on behalf of those who do not know how to read and don't know the tefillot. And by them saying Amen, it is as if they recited themselves. Okay? Today, it's a little bit different. Today, vast majority of people can read, vast majority of people can do that. However, that's the custom, that's the practice. We still do that. It serves a different functionality. It's the communal prayer, so that we don't pray as individuals, but we say it as a community. It has a different value. Doesn't matter. But the point is, we do it on behalf of those who cannot. Why it's important to do that? Well, because they're not being taken care of by the Kohanim. In the old days, whether you daven or not the end of the world, because the Kohanim, by sacrificing bringing the Korban, they take care of your obligation. But once this is not done, the obligation is on me, every individual. That's the case, and I cannot fulfill my obligation because I'm illiterate or because whatever, then we understand the importance of establishing a repetition of that, and by that allowing all those individuals to fulfill their obligation as well, because the obligation is now on the individual. Okay, so I understand for Shacharit, I understand for Mincha, because the Torah talks about those two korbanot of Shacharit and Mincha. However, there is no special korban when it comes to Mariv, right? We said Mariv is what? Is the burning of the leftovers. Sometimes you cook and there are leftovers. Sometimes you cook and there are no leftovers. Yes, I know that technically there's always leftovers, but it's not a korban by itself. It's not a so therefore the rabbi said, okay, if there's no new korban, and this is just because, fine. So there's no real obligation for Mariv. And indeed, the Tfilat Arvit, the Mariv service, started as a reshut, not as an obligation, not as a chovah. It started as a much lower halachic status than Shacharit and Mincha. Eventually, it was accepted. So now we're obligated, but on a rabbinic level, it's not the same. But it has, even today, it has ramifications. One of the ramifications is we don't repeat it. The Chazan does not repeat the Amidah of the Ma'ariv service. Why? Because, okay, there's no obligation in the very beginning to say it. It's just, if you can, it's a reshut. It started as a an act of volunteering. Okay, etc. Just a sec. Another ramification, for example, if you made a mistake, let's assume it's a Rosh Chodesh and you forgot to say Ya'aleh V'Yavo. So generally speaking, if it's Shacharit Mincha, you repeat, or you go back to the beginning of the unit, you go back to whatever that is, okay? We're not getting into the technicality. We discussed that during the year. But if you forgot stuff in Mariv, you don't repeat. Yes.
So I have a question. So you say in Marav, you're burning the leftovers.
Yes.
So why don't they finish burning it all along? Why?
They do. It's just like there's still leftovers. Like, the fire is going on the whole day.
But
There's still left. Yeah. There's like, sometimes there are like, enormous amount of korbanot and stuff, especially around the holidays where people came and it's like, Kohanim were very busy.
so they
it's-
just combine it all to Marav and finish it off.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to-
Yeah. Okay. So these are like, so even today, there are some ramifications to those ancient practices. Okay. So we covered the 3 tefillot in a day, and we covered what is going on over there in those tefillot, which brings us to the 4th tefillah on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, holidays, biblical holidays, obviously, right? Not Hanukkah and not Purim, because they came only after the Torah, so the Torah cannot talk about them. On those days, the Torah says you're going to have additional korban. That's the Musaf. It's called Musaf, and therefore we have Tfilat Musaf. We have the prayer of Musaf. What do you do in that Tfilah? Exactly. So basically, you need to, okay, I already asked God for all the stuff that right? On top of that, if it's Shabbat or a holiday, I don't really ask for that stuff because I need to focus on the nature of the day. Celebrating Shabbat, celebrating the holidays. Okay, I'm not already had my chance. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Or if it's a Rosh Chodesh, for example, or Chol HaMoed, that I already said that stuff in Shacharit. So now, okay, I get it. So in order to have a service, I need to have an Amidah, because that's a heart. You can't have a body without a heart. You can maybe have without an eye, without an arm, but you can't have a body without a heart, right? So you can't have a service without an Amidah, right? So I'm going to have an Amidah, fine. But what's going to happen there in that Amidah? I'm going to talk about the Korban. And indeed, the heart of every Musaf Amidah is the quote from the Torah, those verses that describe the Korban itself. This is why we say all that stuff. Okay. So that's the Musaf. Now what happens on Shabbat and holidays? On Shabbat and holidays, we need to be in a different place, mentally, spiritually, right? Okay. So that has to be reflected also in our tefillot. I'm not going to ask God for money in the bank. I'm not going to ask God for all that stuff that I'm asking during the week, because I'm not supposed to be thinking about that stuff. So, how many blessings do we have in the Amidah altogether during the week? 19. Good. So, and we spoke about many times that the structure is that we have beginning, middle, and end, right? And then and they differ in their nature. So the beginning is the first 3 brachot. It's called Shevach. It's praise. Then we have the middle, 13, which are petitions or requests. And then we have the last three that are Thanksgiving. Okay, and that model, that structure is actually the rabbis learned it all the way, believe it or not, from Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, then Moshe Rabbeinu in next week's Parsha is going to describe his petition to God by Chanan el Hashem ba'et ha'il lemor, when he asked God to forgive him and to actually let him enter the land of Israel. So we see those three elements. He starts with praise, he goes to his request, and he ends with thanksgiving. And the rabbis learned from that this is the right structure, model for us when we come to state or specify our requests before God. Even though it didn't work for him. Correct. No. It's nothing to do with that. God has his own reasons why to accept or whatever, but how we approach it, what is it? The model is we model after Moshe. Okay, fine. So if we take that middle section, which is like all the mundane weekday stuff, all the petitions, all the requests, and we take it out because it doesn't really resonates with the nature of Shabbat and holidays. We took it out. So we had 19. We left the first three of the beginning. We left the last three of the end. Right? We took out 13. So now we have 6 only, 3 and 3. What do we do in the middle?
We also talked about the nature of like Shabbat, holiday, whatever.
Okay, good. So we put one blessing. We put one blessing, which is going to talk on the nature of the day. And indeed, what's the name of that blessing is Kedushat Hayom, sanctity of the day. So on Shabbat, he's going to talk about Shabbat, and a holiday is going to talk about the holidays. That's it. Very simple. And this is why the Amidah for Shabbat or the holidays is also called Tfilat Sheva. Tfilat Sheva. The Tfilah of 7, because it's 7 blessings, unlike the weekday, which we call Shmoneh, 18, because technically we have 19. Okay, but we spoke about that. Okay, that's for historical reasons. Okay. So we understand what we have on Musaf, we understand what we have on Shabbat, it's the 7. Okay, so during the week, we have Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. The Amidah is the same Amidah. Right? It's the same 13 brachot all the time. Why? Because Sunday is a Sunday, Monday is a Monday. From the beginning of Sunday, it's yes, I get it. Maybe on Mondays it's the day that I wear my blue shirt, and on Tuesday I wear my pink shirt. But in terms of like the way the world operates, it's a weekday. It's a day of creation. It's a day in which I'm supposed to advance the world. It's a day that we model after God and the story of creation. And therefore, we need all those needs in order to help God advance the world. What happens on Shabbat?
We rest.
We stop, we rest. We don't do that. Good. So no petitions, great. I have one blessing, talks about Shabbat. But here it becomes interesting. Shabbat is also a unique day in its nature, which evolves. Okay, so that 25-hour period that we call Shabbat changes. Okay, from a spiritual perspective. Friday night is not the same, let's call it energy. I know I've been here in California for a while now. Yeah, it's not the same energy as Shabbat morning. And Shabbat morning is not the same energy as Shabbat afternoon. Okay, that's okay. So that has to be reflected also in our tefillot. And while my weekday tefillah the Amidah is exactly the same, when it comes to Shabbat, the middle section, i.e., the section that talks about Shabbat, changes. So that middle bracha from Friday night to Shabbat morning to Shabbat Musaf to Shabbat Mincha is going to change. And how it progresses and changes, that has to do with the themes of, we haven't said that for a while, creation, revelation, redemption. Thank you. Good. These are the three motifs that we're dealing with throughout our tefillot. Right? So Friday night, think about it, the Kiddush and the verses that we highlight and all that kind of stuff. Friday night, it talks about creation, etc., etc. That's about, it's the Shabbat of creation. It's the first Shabbat in the Bible. God worked for 6 days, and the seventh he rested. Therefore, the bracha that we talk about on Friday night emphasizes creation. Good, Shabbat of creation. Then we fast forward to Shabbat morning, right? Shabbat morning, the theme is not creation, but rather it's revelation. It's the Shabbat of Sinai. It's the revelation of Sinai where we got the 10 commandments and we're commanded about Shabbat. It's a different aspect of Shabbat. We didn't get any of the laws of Shabbat, all that kind of stuff in the story of creation. We just know that God stopped. That's it. Okay, so that means we need to rest. God, okay, got it. But all the laws of Shabbat and everything, nothing to do with that. That came later on, thousands of years later, at Sinai, when we're commanded about Shabbat. And guess what? So Shabbat morning is revelation. So what is it that we talk about? Revelation at Sinai. Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. Moses rejoices in his share. What is that share? And ushnei luchot avanim horid beyado. And he came down the mountain with 2 tablets. Boom. Okay, that's Sinai. That's revelation. Let's put aside Musaf for a second. Well, actually, we spoke about Musaf. What do we talk about in the Musaf? We talk about the Korban. This is a direct quote from the Torah. We quote those verses of the Musaf sacrifice, which brings us to Shabbat Mincha. Shabbat Iwa. So if we had creation and we had revelation, then what are we going to be dealing with in the afternoon? Redemption. Because redemption is when creation and revelation come together. And that's the future, right? So we have also, okay, I'm going to talk about that in a second. So we have redemption. And redemption is automatically associated with what? Messianic times, whatever, the future. So if Friday night was creation, it's also the theme of the past. Thank you. Right? Creation is the past. And Shabbat morning is redemption, is associated with present. Because that's what we are, we're living, right? And then in the future is going to be the redemption. And so the whole theme is future redemption. And what do we say there? Ata echad v'shimcha echad. You're one and your name is one. That means that is a direct correlation to the prophecy of Zechariah. Bayom mahu, yeah, Shem echad u'shmo echad. Right? That's that. Just like that. So that is that. So in Bayomahu, on that day, in the future, when everybody recognizes God's kingdom, blah, 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 all that stuff. So that's the redemption, and that's the future. Quickly into the Shalosh Regalim, or even actually the biblical holidays. Right? What happens there? If it's Shabbat, forget it. It's Shabbat. But most of the time it falls on a weekday. A weekday, I get it that it's Pesach and it's a special day. Therefore, my tefillah is not going to be dealing with the 13 petitions. I get it. It's Shavuot. I'm not going to say all those petitions. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's still a Monday. It's a Tuesday. It's a Sunday. It's a Thursday. From a spiritual perspective, going all the way back to the story of creation, it has a different energy because we infused it, okay? And we made it into a holiday, but at the end of the day, it's a Wednesday. It doesn't have that energy of Shabbat. It has different energy, but not the same, okay? And therefore what?
It says to them its own.
Okay, but it means that a couple of things. My Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit. Yes, I'm going to talk about Kedushat Hayom. I'm going to talk about the sanctity of the day. I'm going to talk about the holiday, but it's going to be the same. Because at the end of the day, it's a Monday. And Monday doesn't evolve like Shabbat. Tuesday doesn't evolve. From the beginning of Tuesday till the end of Tuesday, it's still a Tuesday. Okay, it goes to the theological ideas of creation. We can see also, by the way, ramifications in our practice today. One of the big differences between a holiday and Shabbat is what? Cooking. Of course, I knew that Nechama is going to do that. Cooking, right? You can cook. Cooking, why cooking is prohibited on Shabbat? Because it's creating, right? It's creating. Okay? On a holiday, I can create within limitations. Okay, I get it. But I can create. Yes, I'm transferring fire. I get it. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty of the technicality. That's a different story. That's a different class. I can change the food. I can take a potato that is not edible, I hope for most people, before it's cooked, right? And I make it edible. That's permissible on the holidays. I can do that. I get it. That's the fundamental difference. So I can create. Why? Because it's a Tuesday. I can do that. It's fine. Why can't I do all the stuff that I'm allowed to do? Because the Torah wants me to focus on the holiday. If you're going to be allowed to do all the melachot, you're going to do it, then you're going to go to work, or you're not going to focus on the holiday. You're not going to focus on your family. You're not going to focus on community. You're not going to enjoy the holiday. You're going to find excuses. Oh, I can't go this. I have this meeting, and then whatever, that kind of stuff. It's going to be just a regular day. So the fact that the Torah said, no, you're not. But you can still that there's like some elements even today in our practice that show us that it's different than Shabbat. What do we do on Shabbat? On Shabbat is we say there's a concept of Kviya V'Kaima. That means that Shabbat was established from the beginning, the creation of the world. From the very beginning, the seventh day is that day of Shabbat. Whether you celebrate it or not, that's a different story. However, it's Shabbat, and it had that energy even before before Sinai. Okay? What happens at Sinai, it's that the laws were added, and it was starting to formalize in the way okay? So the dress was given, and it was dressed up. But the nature of the day was already established in the times of in creation. What happens in the holidays? Holidays, let's call it Sinai. It's not really Sinai, but whatever, right? The Torah tells us Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. What happened before them? Nothing. Before the Exodus from Mitzrayim, there was no Pesach. Well, actually, if you listen to one of my classes, you know that there was already from the times of Abraham, there was something about that, but that's a different class. But the point that there was no holiday of Pesach. There was no holiday of Shavuot before Matan Torah. There was no holiday of Sukkot before the Torah told us that we need to celebrate Sukkot. Right? So it is that the Torah tells us, and what we do, we establish the calendar, remember? Right? The Beit Din, whatever, the whole thing. We establish the calendar, and therefore we determine when Pesach is going to be, when Sukkot is going to be, when Shavuot is going to be, not Shabbat. Shabbat we can't decide. You know, there's no such a thing that the Sanhedrin on the rabbi is going to come and say, no, we need another day. Shabbat is being pushed to Sunday. Oh, somebody already did that, right?
Yeah.
It
was a great success.
Yeah, it was a great success. But you know, they kind of like established a whole different operation. But when it comes to the holidays, we have the authority to decide. Oh, we're going to add another month this year. We're going to decide that this month is going to be 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. This one's going to be only 1 day of Rosh Chodesh. Right? We have control. Therefore, what counts when to infuse that holiday energy is what? Not God, be. God tells us that we need to celebrate, but we're going to decide whether it's going to be now or in a month from now by adding another month on a leap year, right? For example. So that energy is a result, the holiday energy, whatever that means, is a result of our decisions. And by the way, the expression in the Tefillah is exactly that. How we finish the bracha, the blessing in the middle of the Amidah on Shabbat, Baruch Ata Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbat. God who sanctified the Shabbat. What do we say in the holidays? Mekadesh Israel ve'azmanim. God who sanctified Israel, and Israel sanctified the times. So we have control of that. Okay, so that's kind of the whole thing about that. I want 2 minutes of your time, totally unrelated, something to, or 1 minute, unrelated to this, just like a quick thought about Tisha B'Av that is coming. It's 3 times that we say Eicha over the weekend. The first time is Torah reading, right? Moshe Rabbeinu says, Eicha esa levadchem tochachem u'ma'asachem ve'rivchem. Moshe is complaining about the people, and especially in what context, that they come to him for judgment. And he said, I can't do it. Eicha, he uses the word Eicha. How? But how could I? Then the Haftarah. In the Haftarah, Isaiah says, Haita, Eicha haita lezona kirya ne'emana. How low could Jerusalem, obviously a metaphor to the Jewish people, could go? And he said, Mela'ate tzedek ve'ata meratzchim. That it's all corrupted. There's no judgment. There's no justice. That's the sin of Yerushalayim, of the Jewish people, right? And then the third one, obviously, is the kina, is the limitation of Eicha, that what we're used to, that Yirmiyahu, that Jeremiah says after destruction, talking about the loss, mourning, etc. So the Midrash already talks about the 3 Eichas, and the Midrash says what? That there are different stages, different phases of the Jewish people. But I was thinking about it, and I think that there is like also an arc between the 3 Eichas, the connecting all the 3 Eichas. You know how you get to the Eicha that Jeremiah is talking about? The destruction is being obsessed with justice, with court, with this, with that, all that stuff. When there's no compassion, when there's no special circumstances, when I don't when I refuse to recognize that lifnei meshurat hadin, sometimes you need to recognize special circumstances. There's no compassion. Sodom, the worst place on earth, was so terrible. You know why? Because the Chazal said, Midat Sodom, what's the characteristic of Sodom? Sheli, sheli, shelcha, shelcha. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. You're not going to ask me for any favors. You're not going to ask me for anything, and I'm not going to ask you for anything. Everything is going to be exactly to the letter of the law, 100%. That's it. No excuses, no adjustments, no anything. None of that stuff. That is to be a sodomite. The Torah wants something else. The Torah says, if everything is the language that we converse is about, I'll see you in court on everything. Talk to my lawyer, rather than being able to recognize special circumstances, to show compassion, to be able to work it out with your brothers and sisters. This is how you're going to get to the destruction. This is how you're going to end up in the Eicha that is Jeremiah is talking about. It starts with justice. It's not about lack of justice. It's being obsessed about it. It's realizing that we can't solve any conflict and we can't handle anything without a lawyer, without the court, without this. That is the problem. That is the true corruption. And that is going to lead us to destruction. The Torah wants us to recognize, yes, you need to have justice, you need to have judges, you need to have court system, you need to have all that stuff.
Sounds so actual, so present.
But you need also to recognize that there are circumstances. Giving tzedakah, it's the opposite of justice. I don't have to give you. I work for my money. I'm going to use my money. The Torah says, I get it. You work for your money, it's your money, I get it. But you know what? I want you to give tzedakah to somebody. He's less fortunate, whatever. Why? Because it all belongs to God ultimately. I get it. But the point is, it's not according to the law. There is no law that forces you to give tzedakah or to do a favor to somebody or to be nice to your friends or to your neighbor or just like do. There's just correct. I understand. I don't have to, when I say shali, shali, shalcha, shalcha, what is this? What Sdom says, it means don't come to me. You're stuck in the middle of the night and you need like whatever. So don't come to me. Does it cost me anything? No. I can be nice. I can do a favor to a neighbor or what. That it's the opposite of what Judaism is all about. So I know that we live in the 21st century where there are a lot of lawyers and they're very, very busy, especially here in America.
To police everything.
But we need to also recognize that the Torah expects us to build a society on chesed, to build a society that is attuned to those in the margins of society as well, the less fortunate. Otherwise, we're going to end up with the people that came to Moshe for every tiny thing, too much about, court, into what Isaiah is talking about, that because of being so obsessive, there is no justice anymore, which led to the destruction. These are the connection between the three Eichas. And my hope and my prayer is that we learn that lesson and we're not gonna end up there. And with God's help, we will see the redemption, and may this be the last Tisha B'Av that we observe.
Amen.
Like, Caroline's what you said, one of the most beautiful refrains